Chapter 5 of the Innovator's Dilemma, the question, how can established market players react to disruptive innovation? What is the best organizational structure? What is the best strategy for dealing with such entrants? This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's November 20th, 2020. This is Krim Delco. For the day, the fund is down 2%. The market's flat. For the year, we're up 256%. The market is up roughly 10.8%. We are outperforming by 245.2%. The question of how to deal with disruptive entrants is discussed in Chapter 5, and I want to elaborate on this topic, use Volkswagen, Tesla, and the electric car industry as an example, and then maybe also go into the other disruptive factors that we're looking at these days. One is Bitcoin, Apple with the M1 chip, and potentially also some other areas of disruption that we're seeing. But let's focus on Tesla and the car industry. So Christensen in the first 4 chapters has explained what disruptive innovation actually does to established players. It makes them not look at this new technology because the internal workings of any established market player are always going towards higher margin projects, higher return projects. And almost by definition, in Christensen's framework, new entrants, new technology does not have those metrics. And that's precisely the reason why established players, internal managers, salespeople, marketing people, they don't really care about these new metrics that the new technology enables, because it doesn't help them grow their margins, their return on investment, and all these other factors which are so key in every large organization, at least in the system as we have known it prior to the Innovator's Dilemma. In Chapter 5, Christensen starts with the question, now how can we deal with this dynamic as an established player in the market? And he brings 2 examples or 2 options. One is you top down in the organization, you decide we're going to do this. And number 2, you create a new independent organization, a new startup within or even outside of the company that deals with this new innovation. And he's not using those words, but now 25, 30 years later, we can use some of the knowledge that has been created in the last few decades. Basically, what he's trying to say is build an innovation stack, to use Jim McKelvey's arguments, build an innovation stack around this new technology and start solving problems that this new technology really helps you solve, and don't just squeeze it into the old structure. That's what Christensen is saying. Now let's take the example of electric cars and Tesla. Tesla started with the Roadster, and then the Model S in 2012 was the big breakthrough. In those times, we had a couple of things that the new technology, which is battery, powertrain, and battery management, those are the key technologies that electric cars enable. And I'm going to just put a little caveat here. I'm not talking about the software side of the business, which in our view is another disruptive factor. I am just talking about the hardware now. So as far as the hardware was concerned, the electric car was a disruptive technology because it created a new market, the luxury electric car, and it had a couple of things which were very powerful. One was lower cost of ownership, and the other was much better acceleration and performance in general than the internal combustion engine. Let's also add a third one, which is no emissions, which I think is an important factor. If you're next to a car these days, an internal combustion engine, and it just smells bad, you have to go to the gas station. I think that is a factor, maybe not the key factor, but it is a factor. But for sure, acceleration, speed, fun driving, and also the lower cost of ownership, those are real metrics that do matter for customers. However, the technology 10 years ago was not ready in terms of range. There was no range and no charging capabilities whatsoever, and that was a big problem. And the main manufacturers, the main car buyers, main OEMs, they were all sitting in their meeting rooms saying, look, we have our core customer. Let's take BMW or Daimler. Let's take BMW. That is the best example in my view. Our core customer is an upward mobile upper middle class, upper middle class, or even rich person, let's say a Silicon Valley person making a couple $100,000 a year. They want a fun car, fun to drive, space, performance, all these things. Tesla was able to give all of that, but they were not able to give the range, and therefore the salespeople and all these other people who were involved in that process would say, well, we cannot provide on this particular metric, and that is way too important, so we are not going to be able to serve this market at a high margin. And therefore, they were neglecting this new technology. Tesla came in. They also started to solve the chicken and egg problem in terms of charging by building their own supercharging network, and they kept relentlessly improving the battery technology and the charging speed to the point where with the introduction of the Model 3, maybe around 2018-19, I think the range problem was solved. Today, there is no more range anxiety because number one, you have a lot of charging stations, and number two, the charging speed is almost there. I would say 20 minutes, and you can go for another 200-300 miles. That is perfectly fine, particularly if you add something like a Netflix and these kinds of things to the equation where you can then sit in the car and watch Netflix and things like that. I think the problem is solved. We have done a road trip ourselves with a Tesla Model Y, and it was absolutely a non-event in terms of charging. We never had range anxiety. Well, we had one problem, and this was the absolute first long distance drive we did when we drove from San Francisco to Tahoe, and we underestimated the uphill. So to be fair, we did have some range anxiety there, but that was the first time we did it. And I can tell you now with the experience, we know exactly what to do so that range anxiety is gone. So the inflection point has happened. Tesla is now catching up with that one big metric, which is range anxiety, delivering on all the other factors, and therefore disrupting the car industry. The car industry is answering, and we have two good examples. One is Daimler a couple of weeks ago, and Volkswagen actually this week. Let's focus on Volkswagen. Volkswagen, according to CEO Herbert Diess, is going to do the first approach that Christensen suggests, which is the top-down approach. So Herbert Diess wants to force his organization to do two things. Number one, catch up with Tesla, and number two, become a software powerhouse. Those are the two things that, according to Herbert Diess, are necessary for Volkswagen to catch up with the electric car disruption and enter the new age of electricity and e-mobility and all these other buzzwords that they're using. In our opinion, they're making a fundamental mistake. The mistake they're making here is that they are underestimating the fact that they are being disrupted on the hardware side. This is trying to paint a narrative that Volkswagen is behind on the software side, but has full control on the hardware side. We are making the conjecture that this is also behind on the hardware side, and here's why. The hardware side of electric cars has been developed through the innovation stack that Tesla has started with the Roadster. This innovation stack has allowed Tesla to solve problems, create problems, solve problems, etc., to the point where they have a compound knowledge now to make a battery, a powertrain, and a battery management system that gives Tesla something between 20 and 40% better performance per dollar, per kilogram. Any which metric you look at, Tesla is beating the competition. The reason they are beating the competition is because the competition, as far as we know today, with a few examples, with a few exceptions, maybe Rivian, but most of the competition is not vertically integrated, not building an innovation stack around battery management, and powertrain. They're building their innovation stack around existing value networks being, they're doing the same thing like they've been doing with the IC, which is buy components, put them together, slap your brand on it, and then go and sell and market and be a marketing and finance company. This is what the OEMs are doing. This is what Volkswagen is doing. And in our opinion, Volkswagen is behind on the hardware side because they're buying components from established suppliers, Continental, Infineon, Magna, Bosch, etc. That is not going to work in our view because the innovation stack has not been built far enough and commoditized far enough for this to happen. By the way, this is also our biggest concern about NIO, because this is also NIO's problem, NIO's business model, which is horizontal integration. And horizontal integration at this point in the electric car value chain, in the electric car development, in our view, is not going to work relative to the one competitor which is fully vertically integrated, and that is Tesla. Now, here are the critics, and I'm going to dissect a little bit from Clayton Christensen now. And the critics are saying, well, Tesla could be like Apple. Tesla could be the one innovator, like the Macintosh in the 80s, change the game, but then still lose the war because other dynamics might happen. Now, of course, we cannot see the future, but as I discussed at length yesterday, it is absolutely important to have a theory and to be able to have an explanation for what we're measuring when we're measuring things, and then conclude if those measurements are relevant to our thesis. So in this case, let's do this in real time at an example. So we have an explanation for why we think Tesla is not going to be like Apple, for why we think Tesla has the ability to actually revolutionize the market and disrupt the market and win in the marketplace. And here's why. We believe that it is crucial for an electric car maker to be a leader in batteries, in powertrain, and in battery management. I'm not talking now about the operating software, the software as a service model. None of these things are at this point crucial for our thesis, which is to be a leader in the electric car space. You have to have you have to continue on the innovation stack for battery, powertrain, and power management. And this is where Tesla is still leading the pack. In fact, they have changed the game again with the Battery Day, which I think was the biggest event in the stock, in the company this year by far. I don't want to diminish the execution of the Model Y and other things, but this is absolutely by far the most important thing. The Battery Day was a clear statement that they are going to increase the pace of innovation on the battery side, the powertrain, and the battery management system. I want to add a fourth component here, which is the manufacturing at scale, which is related to those three. So I cannot emphasize how important this is. For us right now, the main component which drives Tesla stock, Tesla company, whatever you want, is not the software and the self-drive and all these other things which are great. Decarbonizing energy is important, but they still have to be the winner on the very basic car. The car has to be the best, and we still need that 3 to 5 year advantage. And here's why. It's not necessarily because of BMW and Volkswagen. Like we said, we believe they have the wrong strategy. We believe they will not be able to catch up just because they have the wrong strategy. It is because of the Chinese. And the Chinese, to us, are they are risking to become the disruptors of Tesla. This is possible. We have seen disruptors being disrupted, Netflix, Disney, for example. So there is definitely a risk. We have been 30 years into the innovator's dilemma, so people have learned, and particularly the Chinese are learning very fast. So what is Tesla's answer to the Chinese risk of disruption? It is a $25,000 car, or in other words, they are adjusting their cost structure to a certain level where they're anticipating already the risk of disruption coming to them from, let's say, the Chinese, or let's call them the new entrants within the electric car space. This is also a possibility that we have to consider, and we believe that $25,000 car, or in a more granular way, the adjustment of the cost structure, or even more granular, the adjustment of the battery technology, the battery management, and the powertrain to the $25,000 price tag. That is the key for Tesla to fend off disruption coming from below, and also the key for Tesla to keep disrupting the established market. Because no matter what, Volkswagen, Daimler, all these guys, they will get better at what they do because their suppliers will get better. But since Tesla is increasing the space, or to use a sports analogy here, and I'm not a big fan of that, but in this case, I think I can use it. If you have Volkswagen wants to catch up with Tesla, so you want to catch up with Usain Bolt, fine, run faster, but Usain Bolt just increased his speed again by 30, 40, 50%. So not just you have to catch up, he's running much faster. There's no way you can catch up. And this is one of the biggest flaws of the Volkswagen strategy presentation. They're saying we're going to catch up with Tesla, assuming that Tesla is not going to accelerate, assuming actually Tesla is static, which is, of course, the wrong assumption. So to summarize, we believe that Chapter 5 of the Innovator's Dilemma is incredibly important right now, because we're seeing in real time how incumbents are reacting to the Tesla disruption, both Daimler, we've discussed this in the past, and now Volkswagen, making the mistake that they're trying to squeeze the new innovative disruptive technology into their existing value network, into their existing company with their existing sales channels, development channels, manufacturing, using components, putting them together, still acting like an OEM, horizontally vertically integrated OEM instead of a vertically integrated OEM. And this is the fundamental flaw in their strategy. We believe Tesla will keep disrupting them, keep gaining market share, keep growing. And also Tesla is an answer to their own risk of being disrupted by adjusting their cost structure to the $25,000 car. Unfortunately, I didn't have time in this episode to go into the M1 disruption by Apple in the compute space. This is another episode, and also the Bitcoin disruption. I've discussed it in prior episodes. I think it's worth talking about it, and we will discuss this in later episodes. But for now, Chapter 5, Clayton Christensen, how do people react to disruption? Example, Volkswagen is doing the wrong thing, and Tesla will keep winning in that market because the incumbents are pursuing the wrong strategy. Thank you.